What could be worse than discovering that you live with a serial killer? That's what a Seattle family discovered when they found the victim's belongings in their daughter's backpack. The plot involving Miranda Foster was responsible for an unprecedented trial. Comment from where you're watching me. I'm Hector Zamora and this is another criminal case. May God bless you and your family. One rainy afternoon in March, the quiet routine of the Seattle suburb of Quinnan was shaken by a discovery that would forever change the life of a respected family in the community. Catherine Green and Benjamin Hall, a well-known financial market investor couple, decided to reorganize the house after their daughter, Miranda Foster, recently moved to her own apartment in the city center. Miranda, a renowned clinical psychologist at one of the city's main hospitals, had left some belongings behind. While organizing her daughter's old room, Catherine found hidden in the back of a built-in closet a black backpack that she didn't recognize. What she and Benjamin would find inside that backpack would force them to question everything they thought they knew about their only daughter. Inside the backpack, carefully organized in sealed plastic envelopes, were identification documents, wallets, jewelry, and personal photographs belonging to 3 different women. The names on the documents, Lauren Brox, Holly Rivera, and Sydney Lon, sounded familiar to Catherine. After a quick internet search, the couple discovered that all of them had been reported missing in the past 2 years in the Seattle area. The police department assigned Detective Hassan Michi to lead the investigation. With 15 years of experience in missing persons cases, Michi immediately sensed the gravity of the situation. The items found were not just belongings, but potential evidence in 3 previously unrelated disappearance cases. Initial analysis of the items revealed a disturbing pattern. Each envelope contained not only personal documents, but also detailed notes about the women's routines, including their work schedules, regular activities, and most frequent routes. The dates in the notes matched the periods before the disappearances. Even more alarming was the discovery that all the women had attended the same hospital where Miranda worked as a trauma psychologist. An examination of the records showed that all 3 had sought professional help to deal with past traumatic experiences. Detective Michi noticed another significant detail. The disappearances occurred at regular intervals of about 8 months. Lauren Brox was the first to disappear, in January 2012, after a therapy session. Holly Rivera was last seen in September of the same year, leaving her office downtown. Sydney Lon disappeared in May 2013, after a hospital appointment. As the forensic team processed each item found in the backpack, Catherine and Benjamin tried to come to terms with the possibility that their daughter, a respected professional dedicated to helping traumatized people, could be connected to these unsolved cases. Miranda, who had always demonstrated compassion and dedication toward her patients, had built a solid reputation in the Seattle medical community. The discovery at the Hall home opened a Pandora's box that the police could no longer ignore. The evidence suggested a level of planning and organization that went far beyond simple crimes of opportunity. Detective Michi knew he was just beginning to unravel a much more complex story. The initial investigation raised a crucial question: how could a psychologist seemingly dedicated to helping traumatized people potentially be involved in the disappearance of her own patients? The answer to this question would lead investigators down a much darker path than anyone could have imagined. Within 48 hours of the discovery of the backpack in the Hall residence, Detective Hassan Michi began investigating. The team began to uncover a pattern that went far beyond simple coincidences. Close analysis of Miranda Foster's professional records exposed a number of inconsistencies that, at first glance, might have gone unnoticed. Miranda kept a meticulously organized schedule in her hospital office. However, when comparing officially recorded times to building access logs, investigators noticed subtle discrepancies on several occasions, especially in the days leading up to each disappearance. There were scheduled sessions that did not appear in the hospital's official system. Lauren Brox, the first victim, had weekly appointments scheduled on Tuesdays at 5 p.m. However, security logs showed that she frequently remained in the building until after 7 p.m. Holly Rivera and Sydney Lon exhibited similar patterns. Official schedules did not match actual time spent at the hospital. More intriguingly, Miranda often remained in her office long after her last patients had supposedly left. Detective Michi discovered that Miranda had access to a secondary room in the hospital basement, ostensibly used for group therapy. Records showed that she booked this space regularly, always at the same times when discrepancies in her schedule occurred. The room, located in a more isolated part of the building, had an exit that gave direct access to the employee parking lot. When investigating the victims' backgrounds, another pattern emerged. They were all independent women, professionally successful but socially isolated. Lauren Brox, a marketing executive, had recently moved to Seattle. Holly Rivera, an architect, lived alone and worked mostly from home. Sydney Lawn was a software developer who had just gotten out of an abusive relationship. Investigators found detailed notes in Miranda's personnel files about each of them, far beyond what was expected in normal therapeutic records. There was information about their daily routines, personal relationships, and, most disturbingly, details about their deepest fears and vulnerabilities. Miranda seemed to have a particular interest in patients who were in moments of transition or emotional fragility. An alarming discovery emerged through the financial records. In the months leading up to each disappearance, small sums were regularly deposited into a secondary account in Miranda's name. The amounts, always below the threshold that would require mandatory reporting, came from different sources, all seemingly legitimate, but impossible to fully trace. Miranda's demeanor during the first interviews with the police caught the attention of Detective Michi. She maintained a studied calm, answering questions with professional precision. For someone whose patients had disappeared, her concern seemed strangely contained. She offered plausible explanations for each inconsistency found, always backed by some administrative or professional justification.
As the investigation progressed, Catherine and Benjamin Hall provided information that shed new light on the case. In the week leading up to each disappearance, Miranda had displayed unusual behavior. She made surprise visits to her parents, a rare occurrence in her normally structured routine. During these visits, she would spend hours in her old bedroom, allegedly organizing old papers. The forensic team, analyzing the items found in the backpack, identified a disturbing detail. Some of the photographs of the victims had been taken from angles that suggested prior surveillance. The images showed the women going about their daily routines, clearly unaware that they were being photographed. More intriguingly, some of the photos were taken in locations that had no connection to the hospital or therapy sessions. As Michi and his team connected these dots, an anonymous call to the police station opened up a new and unexpected line of inquiry. The informant mentioned a similar incident that had occurred 3 years earlier in another state, involving a young psychologist with a different name, but whose description was disturbingly familiar. The anonymous call opened a door to the past that Miranda Foster had tried to carefully hide. Detective Michi discovered that 3 years before the events in Seattle, a psychologist named Miranda Parker had completed her residency in Boston. What caught investigators' attention was not only the similarity of the first name, but the fact that 3 patients had also disappeared during that period. A search of the Boston Police Department's files revealed that Miranda Parker had abruptly left the city shortly after her last patient disappeared. The documentation found showed that she had legally changed her last name to Foster before settling in Seattle, using financial resources from an inheritance received from a distant aunt. A story that investigators now questioned. The pattern in Boston was disturbingly similar. The patients, all independent professional women seeking help to overcome trauma, disappeared without a trace. At the time, authorities failed to establish a connection between the cases, mainly because the disappearances occurred in different police districts. Investigators had no reason to suspect a seemingly dedicated professional. However, research into Miranda's academic record revealed another intriguing detail. During her time at the University of Pennsylvania, she had specialized in an unusual field, the study of trauma survivors' behavior and their coping mechanisms. Her thesis, ironically, focused on how traumatic experiences can permanently alter a person's behavioral patterns. Catherine and Benjamin Hall, still processing the revelations about their daughter, provided crucial information about Miranda's time living in Boston. During those years, she rarely visited her family, always using excuses related to her intense work at the residency. However, she made regular transfers to a savings account, claiming to be saving to open her own clinic. A plan that never materialized. Investigators discovered that Miranda maintained a consistent pattern of documentation in all the cities where she worked. On her personal computer they found encrypted folders containing detailed information about potential patients. Long before these people became her official clients. This suggested a level of premeditation that went beyond opportunism. A former colleague of Miranda's in Boston, who asked to remain anonymous, recounted a disturbing incident during a professional conference. Miranda showed an unusual interest in cases of patients who had completely cut ties with their families after traumatic experiences. Her fascination with the subject seemed to go beyond normal academic interest. Analysis of financial records in Boston revealed a pattern similar to that found in Seattle. Small deposits, always below the reporting limit, were regularly made into different accounts. The origin of the money was impossible to fully trace. But the transactions always occurred in the months before or after the disappearances. During the investigation in Boston, Detective Michi's team discovered something even more disturbing. Miranda had participated in a study group specializing in advanced therapeutic hypnosis techniques. The group's coordinator remembered her as a student exceptionally interested in methods of suggestion and behavioral control. Investigators also discovered that between Boston and Seattle, Miranda spent 6 months in Chicago, using a different last name. Although her stay in the city was brief, it coincided with the disappearance of 2 women who attended the same medical center where she temporarily worked as a consultant. The sum of these findings outlined someone who had developed her professional skills not only to help, but potentially to identify and exploit vulnerabilities. Each city represented not only a new stage in her career, but also a refinement of her method. As Detective Michi and his team continued to unravel Miranda's past, an accidental discovery in an abandoned warehouse in Boston was about to reveal evidence that would definitively connect all the cases. The contents of this warehouse would not only confirm suspicions about her past, but would also reveal an even more disturbing aspect of her crimes. The abandoned warehouse in Boston turned out to be a key piece in the puzzle that Detective Michi was trying to solve. Inside, chronologically organized boxes contained much more than simple medical files. These were meticulous records of how Miranda Foster, formerly Parker, had built her elaborate professional facade over the years. Among the documents found were certificates of participation in psychology conferences, articles published in specialized journals, and letters of recommendation. Some authentic and others cleverly forged. Miranda had built an impeccable professional reputation, presenting herself as a specialist dedicated to the treatment of trauma. Her constant presence at charity events and support groups was not just philanthropy, but a carefully planned smokescreen. The investigation of the warehouse revealed an elaborate system of alternative identities. Miranda maintained 3 different professional profiles, each with its own credentials and histories. These profiles were used strategically in different medical circles, allowing her to maintain parallel connections without raising suspicion. Each identity had its own specialization and area of practice, but all shared the same focus on traumatized patients. The financial records found in the warehouse revealed a complex network of bank accounts and investments. Miranda had created shell companies that looked legitimate, like mental health consulting, but were actually used to move resources discreetly. Transactions were always kept below the limits that would trigger bank alerts, demonstrating a sophisticated knowledge of financial procedures. One particularly revealing item was found on an old laptop stored at the facility. The recovered files showed that Miranda maintained a detailed database of potential patients long before these people sought her services. She monitored online support groups, social media, and even obituaries. identifying people who had recently gone through traumatic experiences. Detective Michi was especially intrigued by a folder marked Intervention Protocols. The documents within it detailed specific methods of approaching different types of patients. Miranda had developed elaborate techniques to gain the trust of her victims. Using her knowledge of psychology to meticulously identify and exploit their vulnerabilities. Miranda's facade extended to her personal life as well. Records showed that she was active in community organizations and maintained a carefully selected social circle. Each friendship seemed to have been strategically chosen to reinforce her image as a dedicated and compassionate professional. Even her relationship with her parents was managed with calculated precision. With visits and communications scheduled to maintain a semblance of normality. In Seattle, her reputation was virtually unimpeachable. She had established herself as a respected specialist. Frequently invited to lectures and workshops. Her colleagues described her as methodical and professional. Always willing to take on the most challenging cases. No one perceived that this willingness to accept complex cases gave her access to particularly vulnerable patients. Analysis of his personal computer revealed an elaborate system of monitoring his patients. Miranda kept detailed files not only on their sessions, but on every aspect of their lives. Security cameras discreetly installed in his office recorded each session, allowing him to study and refine his manipulative techniques. As investigators processed the massive amount of information found, a pattern began to emerge in Miranda's personal notes. Cryptic references to study subjects and current experiments suggested that his crimes had a motivation beyond what was initially suspected. Detective Michi understood that they were dealing with someone who viewed his actions not as crimes, but as some kind of distorted scientific study. The discovery of a coded journal among the files promised to reveal even more about Miranda's true motivations. However, the contents of that journal would be even more disturbing than anyone could anticipate. After 2 weeks of intensive analysis by FBI cryptography experts, the coding system used by Miranda began to be cracked. It was based on psychological terminology, transforming technical terms into a kind of coded language that documented her actions. Detective Michi discovered that the journal was not just a record of events, but a meticulous scientific report. Miranda documented her observations with an eerie clinical detachment, referring to victims as research subjects and describing their reactions to different environmental stimuli. Each entry was dated and catalogued with academic precision. As the investigative team processed this information, Miranda began to show signs of restlessness. Her once meticulously maintained routine began to change in subtle ways. Security cameras caught her making frequent visits to a storage unit outside Seattle, always at irregular hours and using different routes to get there. Court-authorized electronic surveillance revealed that Miranda had initiated a series of financial transfers to offshore accounts. Although the amounts were relatively small, they followed a similar pattern to that seen before the previous disappearances. The difference was that now she seemed to be preparing a possible escape. Catherine and Benjamin Hall, still actively cooperating with authorities, noticed changes in their daughter's behavior during her increasingly frequent visits. Miranda showed an unusual interest in old family documents and asked seemingly casual questions about far-flung properties the Halls owned. On one occasion, she was seen discreetly photographing some documents in her father's office. The investigation into the storage unit Miranda visited shed new light on the case. Through surveillance cameras installed in the area, investigators observed that she spent hours organizing documents and transferring materials between different boxes. More significantly, she always performed these activities wearing surgical gloves, even on warm days. Monitoring Miranda's communications revealed another disturbing detail: she had begun making frequent contacts with a clinic in Vancouver, Canada, apparently looking for job opportunities. Investigators discovered that he had already begun the process of validating his professional credentials in Canada, using a variation of his current name. A significant breakthrough came when the forensic team managed to recover data from the laptop found in his office. The files contained photographs of the victims in everyday situations, taken weeks before their disappearances. The images revealed a pattern of systematic surveillance, with detailed notes about routines, habits, and moments of vulnerability. The pressure of the investigation began to take a toll on Miranda's professional demeanor. Her colleagues at the hospital noticed that she had begun canceling sessions with long-standing patients, something completely out of her usual pattern. She also began requesting access to old files on patients who were not her own, which raised suspicions in the hospital administration. Detective Michi, realizing that Miranda might be planning to disappear, accelerated the process of gathering evidence. The investigation revealed that she had recently acquired a new identity on the black market, a Canadian passport in the name Emma Souven, accompanied by complete professional documents. As the net was closing in, an accidental discovery made by a hospital maintenance employee opened up a startling new dimension to the case. Behind a fake panel in her office, documents were found that not only connected Miranda to the disappearances in Seattle, Boston, and Chicago, but also revealed a much more ambitious plan in development. The contents of those documents forced investigators to act quickly before Miranda could implement the next phase of her plan, a stage that promised to be even more disturbing and dangerous. On the morning of May 12, 2014, Detective Hassan Michi coordinated a simultaneous operation at several points in Seattle. Documents found behind the fake panel in Miranda Foster's office revealed that she planned to expand her activities to Vancouver, where she had already established a new identity and was in the process of obtaining Canadian medical credentials. The operation needed to be executed with precision. Police teams were deployed at the hospital, Miranda's residence, the storage unit, and all major exit points in the city. Timing was crucial, as Miranda had a flight booked to Vancouver for the next morning, under the name Emma Souven. When officers entered her office, they found Miranda meticulously organizing her files. Her reaction to the arrest was remarkably controlled. He showed no surprise or resistance, maintaining the same professional stance he had cultivated for years, as if he were simply participating in another routine procedure. The search of his residence revealed a secret office in the basement, accessible through a false bookcase. The space contained sophisticated surveillance equipment and a complete laboratory for the production of forged documents. Investigators found several identities in different stages of preparation, suggesting that Vancouver would not be his final destination. In the storage unit, the forensic team discovered evidence that definitively connected Miranda to all of the disappearances. A detailed file documented each case, including photographs, personal notes, and objects belonging to the victims. The material was organized chronologically and catalogued with the same clinical precision found in his professional records. During interrogations, Miranda maintained an analytical, almost academic stance. He spoke of his actions as if describing a scientific study, referring to the victims as participants in an investigation of trauma and human resilience. His language was technical and detached, demonstrating a complete disconnect with the human impact of his actions. The trial began in September 2014. The prosecution presented meticulously organized evidence connecting each disappearance to Miranda's systematic methodology. Records found in his office and storage unit provided a precise timeline of his activities in Seattle, Boston, and Chicago. Catherine and Benjamin Hall testified about subtle changes in their daughter's behavior over the years. Their emotional testimonies contrasted. The trial was dramatically changed by the clinical coolness of Miranda, who remained impassive throughout the proceedings. The couple, devastated by their daughter's actions, had started a foundation to support families of victims of similar crimes, transforming their grief into positive action. The defense attempted to build an argument based on insanity, presenting evidence suggesting Miranda suffered from a severe personality disorder. However, evidence of premeditation, elaborate financial schemes, and meticulous documentation of her crimes contradicted that theory. Her own records demonstrated clarity of thought and deliberate planning. On December 15, 2014, after 3 months of trial, the jury returned its verdict. Miranda Foster was found guilty on all counts. The judge, citing the calculating nature of the crimes and complete lack of remorse, handed down the maximum sentence, multiple consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Catherine and Benjamin Hall, despite the deep pain caused by their daughter's actions, found the strength to move forward. The couple decided to dedicate their time to supporting other families who had gone through similar traumas, turning their personal tragedy into a source of comfort for others. The case of Miranda Foster reminds us that appearances can be deceiving and that trust, once broken, leaves deep scars. However, it also demonstrates that even in the darkest of circumstances there is room for healing and transformation. The courage demonstrated by the victims' families and the Halls in particular, in facing the truth and seeking ways to help others, is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As Miranda serves multiple life sentences, her story remains a reminder of the importance of keeping our eyes and hearts open, not only for the dangers that can lurk behind respectable facades, but also for the human capacity to overcome even the deepest betrayals and find greater purpose in the midst of adversity.